So today I'm going to be discussing the Iranian silver Griffin Rhyton, which often connotes different names used interchangeably, such as the ancient silver chalice or ceremonial drinking vessel, as well as the silver Griffin Rhyton. So this photo was actually pulled up online thanks to the courtesy of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs of the U.S. Department of State. So as we get into the next slide, regarding its source, the ancient silver chalice was made around 700 BC during the pre-Achaemenid period before the establishment of the First Persian Empire by Cyrus the Great in the 6th century. Now, the artifact is a ceremonial drinking vessel cup, which depicts a griffin, a so-called mythical creature with the body of a lion and the head and wings of an eagle, described in many cultures universally throughout the world, as you saw in the previous slide. So the artifact, which was very precious to the Republic of Iran, actually symbolizes the ancient civilization of the country and was unfortunately stolen by looters from the Kalmakara cave in the western highlands of Iran somewhere between 1989 and 1992, shortly after the Republic of Iran had ended its Islamic revolution. And so, as we have previously discussed in our past seminar discussions, when there is civil strife, such as riots or revolutions, occurring within a country, such events often become incubators for illicit looting and trafficking of cultural objects. And so, if we were to apply a chronological concept to explain this incidence of looting and subsequent antiquities trafficking, opportunist theory as well as a cost-benefit analysis approach would best explain this. Specifically because these looters saw the opportunity that because the Republic of Iran had until recently ended the Islamic Revolution, the government was vulnerable. And so these looters absorbed the opportunity to loot and steal, knowing that the lack of government response would be slow and ineffective because the government was focused on rebuilding its resources to help restore the nation. And so people chose to loot due to the institutional collapse of their nation. As we learned previously in our readings, scholars Hollowell of 2006 and Hardy of 2012 discussed that in subsistence economies, people are often experiencing poverty who have few other economic opportunities, and so they might be incentivized to loot for purposes of gaining parity. So as we get into the next slide, you'll see a photo of the Karl Makara cave in the western highlands of Iran. And again, this is the cave where the artifact was purportedly looted. So as we get into the transit route, although it was unknown how the silver griffin writing was transferred from the Kalmakara cave in Iran to Geneva, it was first displayed at the Phoenix Ancient Art Gallery, a well-known antiquities firm based in Geneva in March of 1999. Now, the artifact was brought to the United States in February of 2000 by a prominent Geneva-based antiquities dealer named Hicham Abutam, who had arranged to sell it to a New York collector for just under $1 million. Now, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials say that the New York antiquities dealer, Mr. Abutam, had brought the pre-Achaemenid artifact into the States in February of 2000 and had provided U.S. customs officials at the time with a false import claim invoice, falsely claiming that the piece had come from Syria. When as we know, the actual artifact was looted from the Kalmakara cave in the Republic of Iran. So the recovery of the writing, now basically, although Mr. Obatam was waived due to customs inspection, when he sought to sell the artifact to a collector for just under $1 million, precisely 950,000 US dollars, U.S. federal agents actually caught wind of the sale of the Iranian artifact. They then seized the artifact and arrested Mr. Obatam on smuggling charges for presenting a false import claim in 2003. So the Iranian silver griffin was then stored at a warehouse in Queens, New York City, under the auspices of U.S. immigration and custom enforcement officials. So if we were to observed the 1970 UNESCO Convention of, on the means of prohibiting and preventing the illicit import, export, and transfer of ownership of cultural property. It basically stipulates that the U.S., which is party to this convention, has a mandated obligation to prevent such importation of illicit artifacts coming into the country. The U.S. is also mandated to respect the cultural heritage within the territories for the international relations of which they are responsible, and shall take all appropriate measures to prohibit and prevent the illicit import, export, and transfer of ownership of cultural property in such territories. So the US again was obligated to prevent the importation of this artifact coming into their country once they found out that Mr. Abutam had presented a false import claim back in 2003. So the return of the Iranian silver Griffin Rhyton happened shortly after the Iranian Foreign Minister Hassan Rouhani announced that he would be attending the United Nations General Assembly in New York of September 2013. So at the time, President Obama decided that presenting this ancient silver chalice would be the best diplomatic gesture that would both ease U.S. and Iran relations. Just 2 days later, President Rouhani accepted a phone call from Obama, which marked the first official contact between U.S. and the Republic of Iran leaders since the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Now, U.S. government officials handed over the artifact to the Iranian's cultural heritage chief, Mr. Najafi, on September 28th of 2013. The Persian ceremonial drinking vessel, which dates to the 7th century BC, was confiscated by customs officials in 2003 from an art dealer, but strained relations between the two countries prevented its return. So regarding the artifacts history, it is important to note that there were difficulties in establishing the provenance and ownership history of this artifact. Now, while some experts have authenticated it as an ancient and priceless piece of art, others doubt that it's 2,700 years old. For instance, Alex Jaffe, an archaeologist and historian, argues that the artifact is made of silver sections joined together to form a winged griffin that walks on splayed, clawed feet. Most improbable are three funnels, two on the sides coming out of the body, below the wings, and one that protrudes painfully from the creature's rear end. The griffin saxophone design has no parallels in the ancient world. Anyone with passing familiarity with ancient Near Eastern art, or any kind of art, would become suspicious at the merest glances of this artifact. In a nutshell, Joff basically argues that the silver griffin Rhyton resembles modern, technologically advanced pieces for it to constitute an artifact of 2,700 years old. So as we learned in class as well, provenance of an artifact is important for authenticity, valuation, and ownership. So to conclude this presentation, although the artifact proved to be fake, it was beneficial at the time, precisely because it opened up channels of communication among the People's Republic of Iran and the United States of America. For instance, it was only after the act by the USA of returning the silver Griffin Rhyton that the two presidents spoke directly, which made it the first point of contact between the two nations in 30 years, precisely when the Iranian Revolution had ended. Talks had ceased to exist between the United States and the Republic of Iran. I now conclude my presentation.